There is a triangle drawn on no official map. No government acknowledges its borders. No maritime authority has ever formally named it a danger zone. And yet, somewhere in the stretch of open water between the southern tip of Florida, the island of Bermuda, and the northeastern coast of Puerto Rico, more than 50 ships and 20 aircraft have disappeared without explanation, without wreckage, without bodies, without any trace that suggests what happened in the final moments before the sea took everything. The water here looks like every other stretch of the Atlantic. It is blue and deep and occasionally violent in the way that all open ocean is violent. There are no visible warning signs, no discoloration, no permanent fog, no supernatural signature that announces you have crossed into something different. And yet, the disappearances here have a quality that disappearances elsewhere do not. Ships that vanish in storms leave wreckage. Ships that sink in enemy action leave oil and debris. The ships that disappear in this triangle have a habit of leaving nothing. Not a life jacket, not a cargo manifest soaked with seawater, not a body. 309 men, 11,000 tons of manganese ore, one of the largest vessels in the United States Navy. She left Barbados on March 4, 1918, bound for Baltimore. The weather was unremarkable. Her captain sent no distress call. No wreckage was ever found. No bodies. Not a single piece of the Cyclops has ever been recovered from the ocean floor, despite over a century of improved search technology. President Woodrow Wilson called it one of the most baffling mysteries in the annals of the Navy. The Cyclops remains the single largest loss of life in United States naval history that did not involve combat. The search for the Cyclops began before her absence was officially declared overdue. She was due in Baltimore on March 13, 1918. When she failed to arrive, the Navy initially assumed mechanical delay. By March 20th, the inquiries had begun. By April, the search was fully coordinated, involving multiple vessels and the resources of an empire engaged in the largest war the world had yet seen. Nothing was ever found. Not a single life ring with her name stenciled on it. Not a piece of hull plating that could be traced. Not a body washed ashore on any island in the Caribbean. The Cyclops had been carrying a manifest that included her 309 crewmen and a single high-value passenger, the American Consul General in Rio de Janeiro, who was returning to the United States. The consul vanished with the ship. His diplomatic papers vanished with him. Whatever happened to the Cyclops happened completely, in conditions that the surviving record cannot reconstruct, and it happened in water that has been searched for over 100 years by every technology available to every generation that has cared to look. But the Cyclops was not the first ship to vanish here, and it was not the last. This documentary is not a catalog of supernatural theories. It is an investigation into the ships that vanished, the men who sailed them, the science of what this stretch of ocean actually does, and the long, strange history of a place that has accumulated more legend than evidence. This is the Bermuda Triangle. To understand why ships disappear in this region, you have to understand what the ocean is actually doing here. The Gulf Stream runs directly through the triangle's western edge. It moves at speeds of up to 5 miles per hour. It is warm, several degrees warmer than the surrounding water, and it disperses wreckage with extraordinary efficiency. Something that sinks in the Gulf Stream doesn't stay where it sank. It moves. It is carried northeast into the open Atlantic at a pace that outruns most search operations mounted in the hours after a vessel goes missing. The Gulf Stream's role in concealing the evidence of disasters is not theoretical. It has been documented in modern recovery operations where the location of a sinking was known within minutes and search vessels arrived on station within hours, only to find that wreckage had already drifted dozens of miles from the reported coordinates. The water in the Gulf Stream is moving constantly. The thermocline, the boundary between warm surface water and cold deep water, creates layered currents that move debris in different directions at different depths. A life jacket and the body wearing it may end up in different countries depending on which current catches them. The implication for ships lost before satellite tracking, before reliable radio communication, before any of the modern infrastructure that gives modern disasters their evidence trail, is that the disappearance was not just a sinking. It was a sinking followed by a systematic dispersal of every recoverable trace, performed by water, moving at the speed of a person walking briskly, hour after hour, day after day, until anything that floated had been carried out of any search area that the surviving captains could organize. Below the surface, the ocean floor in this region is among the most extreme on Earth. The Puerto Rico Trench lies along the triangle's southern edge. Before we go any further, I need to stop for a second, because what I've been showing you in these videos only scratches the surface. And I realized at some point that the full picture, the actual pirate code, word for word, the real punishment records, the exact treasure division shares, the ports that secretly funded them, it doesn't fit in a video. I put it all into one document, the Black Flag Codex. It's linked below, and the QR code is on your screen. Now, let's keep going. 27,000 feet, more than 5 miles of water. A ship that sinks into the Puerto Rico Trench is effectively gone. The wreckage would be unrecognizable and essentially unreachable by any search technology that existed before the late 20th century. The shallows of the Bahamas banks present the opposite problem. Here, the water is sometimes only a few feet deep across vast stretches of open ocean that appear on the surface to be navigable sea lanes. Ships running at speed across the Bahamas banks in poor visibility have struck bottom in places where their charts suggested open water. The sand and sediment here shift constantly, making accurate depth readings unreliable, even for captains who know the area well. Weather systems that develop in the Caribbean move north and east through this corridor. The combination of warm, shallow water over the Bahamas banks and deep, cold water to the east creates unstable conditions that can generate waterspouts and localized squalls that form and dissolve faster than a ship's instruments can track. The disappearances that give the Bermuda Triangle its reputation did not begin in the 20th century. They reach back to the earliest period of European navigation in the western Atlantic, when Spanish galleons were crossing this water twice a year with the combined wealth of an empire in their holds. The colonial trade routes ran directly through what we now call the Triangle, because the geography left no reasonable alternative. You came out of the Caribbean, you picked up the Gulf Stream, and you headed northeast for Spain. The Triangle was not an obstacle to avoid. It was the road home. The Spanish treasure fleets lost ships here with a regularity that the colonial records document in exhaustive detail. The 1715 fleet disaster, when 11 of 12 ships were sunk by a hurricane off the Florida coast, scattered treasure that is still being discovered today. These losses were attributed to weather, because weather was the obvious explanation. Nobody was counting them as part of a pattern yet. The pattern began to take shape after the incident that gave the Triangle its most compelling entry point. Flight 19. 5 Avenger torpedo bombers departed Fort Lauderdale at 2:10 in the afternoon on a routine training exercise. The lead aircraft was commanded by Lieutenant Charles Taylor, an experienced naval aviator with 2,500 hours of flight time. His 4 wingmen were student pilots. The mission was straightforward: fly east over the ocean, turn north, fly to the Bahamas, turn southwest, return to base. A triangular route over familiar water in clear weather. At 3:40 in the afternoon, 90 minutes into the exercise, Taylor radioed the control tower. His compasses were not working correctly. He was not certain of his position. He believed he was somewhere over the Florida Keys, southwest of his intended position, and was turning northeast to attempt a return to base. This assessment was incorrect. The flight was not over the Keys. It was almost certainly east of the Florida Peninsula, near the Bahamas, where Taylor had expected to be. By turning northeast to correct for a position error that did not exist, Taylor was flying his flight away from land rather than toward it. Over the next 2 hours, the radio communications became increasingly fragmented. Taylor repeatedly expressed uncertainty about his position. At one point, another pilot's voice was recorded, saying that they couldn't be sure which way was west. Taylor's last transmission was received at approximately 7:04 p.m. Then silence. A Martin Mariner flying boat with a crew of 13 was dispatched to search the area. The Mariner disappeared as well. A tanker reported seeing a burst of flame in the sky consistent with an aircraft explosion. No wreckage was ever confirmed. The mariner that vanished searching for Flight 19 had a known operational issue. The PBM Mariner was nicknamed the Flying Gas Tank by some of its crews because of a tendency for fuel vapor to accumulate in the airframe, particularly in the bilges below the bomb bay. A spark, a static discharge, a single ignition source in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the aircraft could detonate in flight. The tanker that reported the burst of flame, the SS Gaines Mills, recorded the time and the bearing. The location was consistent with the mariner's search route. No survivors were recovered. No wreckage was identified with certainty. The disappearance of the mariner is, in the strict sense, the least mysterious of the Flight 19 losses because the mechanism is plausible and the eyewitness account exists. But the mariner is almost always counted with Flight 19 in the popular telling because the disappearance of a rescue aircraft in the act of searching for a vanished flight is the kind of detail that storytelling refuses to let go. 27 men and 6 aircraft had vanished in the span of a few hours in clear weather. The Navy's investigation concluded that the accident was caused by disorientation after compass failure led to navigational error. The investigation offered a complete rational explanation. Most people who read about Flight 19 did not remember that explanation. They remembered the disappearance. The phrase Bermuda Triangle was first used in print in 1964 in an article by writer Vincent Gaddis in Argosy magazine. Gaddis was cataloging disappearances in the region and needed a name for the area he was describing. He drew the triangle between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, listed the disappearances he had identified, and proposed that something unusual was operating in that region of ocean. He did not claim supernatural causes. He simply suggested that the concentration of unexplained disappearances in a defined geographic area deserved serious investigation. What Gaddis started, Charles Berlitz industrialized. Berlitz's 1974 book, simply titled The Bermuda Triangle, sold 20 million copies in 22 languages. It proposed electromagnetic anomalies, alien abduction, the lost civilization of Atlantis, and time portals as potential explanations. It was spectacularly successful and spectacularly unreliable. Berlitz cited cases selectively, omitted disconfirming information, and occasionally invented details that no primary source could verify. The Lloyd's of London insurance market declined to charge higher premiums for ships sailing through the region. Their actuaries found no statistical evidence that the triangle represented elevated danger compared to other comparably active shipping areas. The United States Coast Guard has consistently stated that the number of disappearances in the triangle is not significantly higher than in comparable areas of ocean, once traffic density is accounted for. These assessments do not explain the specific disappearances. They do not tell us where the Cyclops went or what happened to Flight 19 in its final hours. What they tell us is that the framework of the mystery, the idea that the Bermuda Triangle is categorically different from other dangerous waters, is a narrative construction rather than a demonstrable fact. In 1984, a geologist named Richard McIver published a paper proposing that sudden release of methane hydrate deposits from the ocean floor could explain the disappearance of ships in the Triangle region. The mechanism was genuinely interesting. Methane hydrate is a compound where methane gas is trapped in crystalline water structure under high pressure at depth. The Blake Ridge in the eastern portion of the triangle contains one of the largest methane hydrate deposits in the world. If a large quantity of methane released suddenly, the resulting gas bubble rising through the water column could reduce the density of the water enough that a ship above it would lose buoyancy and sink almost instantaneously before its crew could send a distress call. Stop for a second. What you just heard about the pirate code is the part that rewrites everything you thought you knew. But it only lands when you see the actual shares, the exact fractions written into the Articles of Agreement, the punishments, the port records, the names of the men who funded them from government offices. It's all in the Black Flag Codex, linked in the description. 5 seconds. Grab it now, because what comes next builds directly on it. Link is below. QR code is on your screen. The methane theory has been found to be theoretically possible. The specific conditions required are extremely unlikely in normal oceanographic circumstances. They are not impossible, and they would explain the specific quality of some of the triangle's most puzzling disappearances. Ships that vanished in calm weather with no distress call, whose crews had no warning that anything was wrong. Rogue waves are another candidate. A rogue wave is a deep-water wave dramatically larger than surrounding wave heights, appearing without warning in conditions that would not otherwise suggest extreme danger. Rogue waves were considered a sailor's myth until 2004, when satellite data confirmed they occur regularly in the world's oceans. They can reach heights of nearly 100 feet. A ship struck by a rogue wave in the open ocean, far from any other vessel, could sink in minutes. No distress call. In the Gulf Stream's rapid current, debris would be carried away from the site within hours. The human factors are perhaps the most uncomfortable explanation because they point not at the ocean's mysteries, but at human fallibility. The Bermuda Triangle is one of the most heavily trafficked areas of ocean in the world. More ships and aircraft pass through this region than most comparable areas of open ocean, which means statistically more will be lost here even if the rate per journey is identical to any other sea lane. Additionally, the region attracts inexperienced mariners in disproportionate numbers. South Florida is one of the world's great recreational boating centers. The cases that feed the triangle's mystery include a meaningful number of vessels that were inadequately equipped, operated by crews that were inadequately trained in conditions beyond the vessel's actual capabilities. When a 16-foot boat with a weekend sailor aboard disappears in a tropical squall, the disappearance is real and the loss is real. Whether it belongs in the same category as the USS Cyclops is a question the mythology of the Triangle has always been content to leave unasked. The Carol A. Deering was found hard aground on Diamond Shoals, off Cape Hatteras, on January 31, 1921. She was in good condition, her sails were set. Food was cooking on the stove in the galley. The lifeboats were gone. The crew, 11 men, had vanished. The steering mechanism had been disabled. The anchors were in the water in a configuration suggesting an emergency stop. The ship's papers were missing. Red lights had been reported from a vessel in the area in the days before the Deering was found, the distress signal that no one had responded to in time. The Carol A. Deering investigation involved the State Department, the Navy, and the Commerce Department. It was the largest maritime investigation in American history to that date. Multiple theories were considered: mutiny, piracy, rum-running interception, microbursts. None was confirmed. The crew was never found. The case remains officially unsolved. Diamond Shoals, where the Deering was found, is a graveyard of ships that has its own catalog of disappearances independent of the Bermuda Triangle's mythology. The shoals extend miles offshore from Cape Hatteras in water that shifts from open ocean depth to vessel-killing shallow without visible warning. The Deering had been outbound from Norfolk to Rio de Janeiro and was returning empty when she was sighted by the lightship at Cape Lookout on January 28th. Witnesses on the lightship reported that a man on the Deering's deck called out that the ship had lost both anchors in a storm and was unable to maneuver. The lightship's wireless was inoperative. The message was never relayed. 3 days later, the Deering was found on Diamond Shoals with no one aboard and no clear account of how she had gotten there. The most prosaic explanation, that the crew had mutinied or had been taken off by another vessel for reasons connected to rum running during Prohibition, was investigated and never substantiated. The most dramatic explanation, that she had been the victim of piracy in the form of a Soviet-aligned hijacking operation, was investigated under State Department supervision and also not substantiated. The most haunting explanation is that nothing dramatic happened at all. The crew, for reasons of their own, simply abandoned ship into the lifeboats and were taken by the same water that has taken so many others. And the Deering, with no hand at her wheel, drifted into Diamond Shoals on the current and the wind. The Star Tiger was an Avro Tudor Mark IV aircraft on a flight from the Azores to Bermuda. She carried 25 passengers and a crew of 6. She was never found. No wreckage, no distress call. The Ministry of Civil Aviation investigation concluded that the cause of the accident was not known and might never be known. Exactly 1 year later, the Star Ariel, the same aircraft type operated by the same airline on a flight from Bermuda to Jamaica, disappeared with 13 passengers and crew. Again, no wreckage, no distress call. 2 aircraft of the same type, operated by the same airline, disappearing without trace within a year of each other. The logical explanation is that the Avro Tudor had a structural vulnerability causing catastrophic failure. The aircraft type was withdrawn from transatlantic service after the Ariel's disappearance. Whether the Triangle had anything to do with it, or whether the same accidents would have occurred over any comparable stretch of deep water, is a question the evidence cannot answer with certainty. The Avro Tudor was a transitional aircraft built in Britain after the Second World War as a stopgap design pending the development of more modern airframes. It was unloved by the pilots who flew it. Its pressurization system was unreliable. Its heater was prone to failure at altitude in conditions where failure of the heater meant the crew could be incapacitated by cold before they understood what was happening. The Star Tiger had reported difficulty with the heater earlier in her flight. The Star Ariel reported nothing because she sent no transmission of difficulty before she disappeared. Whether the heater was the cause, whether structural failure was the cause, whether the conditions of the aircraft type were sufficient to explain 2 losses with no recovered wreckage, the surviving record does not say with certainty. What it says is that the aircraft type was withdrawn and the question of what happened to the passengers was left open. The Spanish called the Florida Straits the Channel of the Bahamas, and they feared it the way experienced sailors fear any water that has taken ships they knew. The treasure galleons that carried silver from Potosi to Seville passed through the heart of what we now call the Bermuda Triangle twice a year, every year, for 2 centuries. Every captain who made that crossing understood that the Triangle's geography offered no alternative route and no guarantee of safe passage. The pirates who hunted these routes understood the Triangle's hazards better than anyone. The shallow waters of the Bahamas banks, which could ground a pursuing warship, were navigation hazards turned tactical assets. A pirate captain who knew where the depth changed from 30 feet to 5 feet had an advantage over a naval pursuer who did not. The Florida Straits, where the Gulf Stream pushed northward at its fastest, could carry a vessel far from her intended course in hours if the helmsman miscalculated or the weather shifted without warning. Henry Jennings, one of the founding figures of Nassau's Pirate Republic, operated in these waters in the years immediately after the 1715 fleet disaster. His first significant act of piracy was raiding the Spanish salvage camp on the Florida coast, where Spanish divers were recovering silver from the wrecked fleet. Jennings knew these waters. He understood which sandbars gave cover and which channels allowed rapid escape. The Triangle's hazards were, to him, the working conditions of his profession. Samuel Bellamy, who captured the Whydah galley in February 1717 and accumulated more treasure in a few weeks than most pirates managed in a career, was sailing north along the American coast when a violent nor'easter struck his fleet off Cape Cod in April of the same year. The Whydah, with her treasure, went to the bottom in a storm that had nothing to do with the supernatural and everything to do with the natural violence of the North Atlantic in spring. The 1715 fleet disaster that drew Henry Jennings to the Florida coast was itself the kind of event that makes the Triangle's reputation feel like an old story rather than a modern invention. 12 ships of the Spanish treasure fleet had departed Havana on July 24, 1715, carrying silver and gold from the Mexican mines and Peruvian smelters that had been accumulating in Havana for the previous season. The fleet ran into a hurricane on July 31st off the coast of present-day Florida, in waters that the Triangle's southern boundary now defines. 11 of the 12 ships were destroyed. More than 1,000 sailors and passengers died. The wreckage scattered along the Florida coast from present-day Sebastian to Fort Pierce, where coins from the lost fleet are still washing ashore 3 centuries later. The Spanish crown sent salvage expeditions that recovered a portion of the treasure over the following years. The pirates of the Bahamas raided those salvage camps for what they could carry. The Triangle, in its earliest historical period, was not a place of mystery. It was a place where wealth and weather and human ambition collided with predictable regularity, and the ocean kept what it had taken. The Bermuda Triangle is real in the sense that the water is real, the disappearances are real, and the specific oceanographic and meteorological conditions that make this stretch of ocean dangerous are real and documented. It is not real in the sense that it represents a categorically different kind of danger than other well-trafficked stretches of open ocean. The mystery is partly the ocean's genuine capacity to swallow things without leaving evidence, and partly a narrative construction built by writers who understood that a defined geographic location gives formlessness a shape that people can respond to. The Coast Guard assessment stands. The statistical evidence does not support the claim that ships and aircraft disappear here at rates significantly higher than comparable areas of ocean. What the evidence does support is that when things disappear in this specific region, the combination of depth, current, weather, and geological complexity makes recovery difficult to the point of impossibility. The things that disappear here stay disappeared, which amplifies the sense of mystery beyond what the actual rate of disappearance warrants. The cases that remain genuinely unexplained after the mythological cases are stripped away are still significant. The Cyclops represents a loss of life at a scale that deserves continued investigation, regardless of whether it belongs to a triangle pattern. The Carol A. Deering represents a mystery of seamanship that the evidentiary record cannot resolve. Flight 19 represents the compound failure of instrument malfunction, navigational confusion, and command error playing out across a few hours of a December afternoon over water that offered no landmarks, no reference points, and no margin for the kind of mistake that Taylor made. These are things that happened. They happened in a specific place. The specific place has specific characteristics that contribute to the difficulty of explaining them and the impossibility of recovering evidence that would resolve them. The ocean doesn't explain itself. It has no obligation to. Ships have been sailing into it for as long as human beings have built ships, and the ocean has been taking some of them, without explanation, for exactly that long. The Bermuda Triangle is, in some ways, simply the place where we chose to give that fact a name and a shape and a mythology sufficient to contain our discomfort with it. The trade winds still blow through the Florida Straits. The Gulf Stream still pushes north at 5 miles per hour. The Puerto Rico Trench still descends 27,000 feet into a darkness that no light has ever reached. And somewhere on the ocean floor beneath all of that water, scattered across seafloor sediment that shifts and buries and conceals with patient indifference, are the remains of ships that set out with full crews and full confidence and found something in this water that no one left to describe. The Bermuda Triangle will keep taking ships, not because it is supernatural, because it is a stretch of deep, complex, dynamically active ocean that sits at the intersection of major shipping routes, generates extreme weather with minimal warning, conceals its depths in darkness that human technology has only recently begun to penetrate, and disperses the evidence of disasters with a current that runs faster than most search operations can follow. 309 men sailed north from Barbados in March 1918 and did not arrive. 14 men flew east from Fort Lauderdale in December 1945 and did not return. 11 men crewed a 5-masted schooner found empty with food still cooking in January 1921. Whatever happened to them happened in this water. The water keeps its secrets the way only something very deep and very cold and very permanent can keep them.